The story begins as we see the legendary hitman, Sakamoto, approaching a gang. The men are all scared seeing him, and they try to shoot him, but he easily deflects their bullets and cuts them down. Another group of gangsters arrive, but Sakamoto is able to dodge their bullets and he takes them all out. We learn he was feared by everyone, and there were also other hitmen that looked up to him. But one day he meets a girl named Aia. And he instantly falls in love with her, so he decides to retire and he starts a family with her. But he ends up putting on weight. We see Sakamoto in his store, where he watches a boy playing with his bow, but his arrow doesn't hit the target. So he bends over to pick it up, but the ink in his bag falls out, and it ends up staining a man's clothes. So he gets angry and he threatens to kill the boy. But Sakamoto stops him and stabs him in the neck. But we learn it was just his imagination, and the man finds him creepy. So he decides to leave the boy, thanks Sakamoto for saving him. But a psychic hitman named Shin knows that Sakamoto thought about killing the man. Shin introduces himself, but Sakamoto thinks about attacking him. So he freaks out, telling Sakamoto to stop killing people in his mind. And he reminds him that they used to work together. He realizes that Sakamoto has started a family business, and he wants him to make his comeback, but Sakamoto tells him he's retired. Shin reminds him about his reputation, asking him why he threw it away. But he starts eating noodles, and Shin realizes that he has changed, because he used to eat nothing but field rations. Shin prepares to smoke, but Sakamoto suddenly cuts his cigarette, and he points him to a sign, which mentions that they aren't allowed to smoke there, so Shin realizes that he hasn't lost his touch. A man suddenly calls Sakamoto saying he needs help. And Shin thinks Sakamoto is still working as a hitman. But the man just asks for help trimming a tree. And he's able to do it with incredible speed. Shin continues to watch him as he helps everyone in the town. So Shin realizes that he's not the person he used to be, telling him he looks ridiculous. Shin prepares to leave, as he notes that he hasn't seen Sakamoto in 5 years. But he still thinks he's amazing and he wants to work with him again. He receives a call from his boss, who asks him if he was able to change Sakamoto's mind. But he tells him he couldn't do it, so his boss tells him to kill Sakamoto. Shin doesn't want to do it, but his boss reminds him that no one is allowed to leave the gang. The boss tells Shin to get the job done, or he will send someone else to do it, so Shin realizes that he doesn't have a choice. That evening Shin thinks about Sakamoto, thinking he's about to meet his end, since the boss wants him dead. Shin knows that other hitmen will try to kill Sakamoto if he doesn't do his job, and he notes that if his idol needs to die, he should be the one to do it. The next day Shin visits Sakamoto, telling him he needs to leave the town. But he suddenly pulls out his gun and he tries to shoot him. But Sakamoto spits out a candy, and it collides with the bullet, causing Shin to miss. Sakamoto suddenly disappears. And Shin looks around wondering why he can't read his mind. We see Sakamoto hiding and he launches another candy at Shin, who tries to shoot him again. But Sakamoto throws a cream puff at his head, and he appears behind him, kicking him with tremendous force. As Shin falls to the ground, he wonders what he was thinking when he thought he could kill his idol. When Shin wakes up, he sees Sakamoto's family, and they invite him to have dinner with them, but he's confused as he wonders why they're so nice to him. He thinks the food is poisoned, but when he eats it he realizes that it tastes amazing. And Aya thinks he's just like Sakamoto. He notes that he has never felt this way before, and he realizes that Sakamoto decided to quit because he wants to protect his family. After that Shin thanks Sakamoto for his hospitality, and he points to a sign which tells Shin to come again. He reports to his boss, who calls him a disgrace because he couldn't kill Sakamoto. But he begs his boss to let Sakamoto live because he has a family now. But everyone laughs at Shin, as the boss reminds him that Sakamoto must die, because he abandoned his responsibilities. Shin offers to die in Sakamoto's place, and the boss accepts his offer, saying he won't kill Sakamoto. But Shin knows that the boss is lying, and he points his gun at him, so the boss orders his men to attack and they start shooting Shin. We see Sakamoto listening in, and he realizes that Shin is in danger, so he opens his secret armory, as he prepares to join the fight. Shin takes cover and he starts shooting the gangsters. But a man gets behind him. But he realizes that Shin is gone, and he ends up getting taken out instead. Another man aims a rocket launcher at Shin, who manages to read his mind, so he jumps away as The gangsters realize that he's using his psychic abilities to predict their movements. The boss knows that he can only read minds at close range. So they decide to keep their distance. Shin continues to fight for his life. But he realizes that he's running out of ammo, and a bullet hits his leg, so he falls to his knees. The gangsters prepare to finish him off. And he thinks it's all over for him, but Sakamoto suddenly appears to save him. The boss orders everyone to kill him, but he uses his chopsticks to stop their bullets, and he starts beating them up. The gangsters open fire, but he easily deflects their bullets and stabs them with his pens. He rushes forward, and he breaks a man's gun with his bare hands before knocking him out. And the boss realizes he's in trouble. "I'm in danger." So he tells his bodyguards that they need to shoot Sakamoto together. But he quickly closes the distance and he cuts the boss's gun. And he finishes them off. Shin wonders how Sakamoto knew he was there. So he reveals that he planted a bug in his gun, and Shin realizes that nothing gets past him. He mentions that he needs to leave the town. But Sakamoto gives him an apron, telling him he will get 800 yen per hour, working at the convenience store. After that we see Shin working in the shop. And Aya sees him, telling him the apron looks good on him. He sees an old lady looking for an item, and he uses his powers to help her find it. As Sakamoto's daughter Hana realizes that he really is a psychic. The boy asks him if he's enjoying his shift, so he mentions that it's better than his last job, and the boy wonders what he used to do for a living. But Sakamoto threatens to kill him if he tells the truth. So he tells the boy he used to work as a cleaner, and he continues to serve the customers who enter the shop. The next day Shin recalls the fight they had with the gangsters, telling Sakamoto he killed everyone with a single blow. But Aya becomes upset, asking him if he's working as a hitman again. So he explains that he didn't kill anyone, saying he made sure that his attacks weren't lethal. She reminds him about the family rule, and she threatens to divorce him if he breaks it. Shin asks him about it, but Sakamoto kills him in his mind again, and he tells Shin to keep his mouth shut. They head to Niakita Chinatown, where Sakamoto buys pork buns for his family, because he wants them to enjoy eating it. But as they make their way back, a girl suddenly crashes into them, and Sakamoto realizes that his pork buns are ruined. A group of gangsters appear, and we learn that she was running away from them, but the girl named Lu tells them to bring it on. Shin tells Sakamoto they should leave, but he's depressed, because he thinks Hana will cry if she sees the pork buns. The gangsters charge in, but Lu knocks them down, as Shin realizes that she's using Tai Chi. They surround her and she tries to fight back, but one of them restrains her and they threaten her with a knife. The man prepares to stab her, but Sakamoto breaks his knife and knocks him out. Shin takes out the man restraining her, but the third man pulls out his gun, so she disarms him and beats him up. Another group of gangsters arrive, and they think Sakamoto and Shin are her friends. So they run away as the gangsters try to shoot them, but they manage to escape. After that, the leader of the gangsters report to their boss, and he tells him what happened. But the boss becomes angry, reminding him that they killed everyone in Lu's clan. Just to track her down, a hitman named Bacho suddenly kills him. And he starts playing with the man's head, but his brother's son, he tells him he shouldn't play with dead bodies. The boss orders them to find Lu and take her key, because they needed to rule the black market. Bacho asks him if they can kill anyone who gets in their way, so he tells them they can do whatever they want. We return to Lu, as she reveals that she's the daughter of a mafia family. And she explains that the gangsters want to take her key, so that they can use it to access her clan's hidden vault. Shin tells her to get rid of it so that they will stop bothering her. But she refuses, as she reveals that her parents died protecting it. So she wants to defend it with her life. She doesn't want Shin and Sakamoto to get involved, so she bids them farewell. But Sakamoto asks her if she knows how to make pork buns. So she reveals that she knows how to make them. And he decides to help her, under the condition that she makes them for him. But Bacho suddenly kicks him away and he mentions that he doesn't like the way Bacho kills people. Shin wonders who they are, so Lu explains that they're twin hitman, and they're known for charging a ridiculous amount, but they never miss their target. She adds that they're insane because they enjoy killing people. And they even draw pictures of their victims' heads. During their free time, Bacho realizes that they're famous. But Sunny thinks they should be ashamed, because hitmen shouldn't draw attention to themselves. Shin tries to punch him, but he stops the attack, asking Shin if he's mad because they killed his friend. But he calls them idiots, saying only amateur hitmen don't know who Sakamoto is. Bacho suddenly appears behind Lu and prepares to kill her, but Sakamoto smashes him to the ground, causing it to collapse. He realizes Sakamoto has incredible strength, and he tells Lu to surrender the key. But she refuses, saying she will guard it with her life. But he mentions that her parents told him the same thing before he killed them, so she becomes angry and she charges in. But Sakamoto pulls her back, and Shin tells her she's being reckless. He tries to kill her, but Sakamoto catches his blade. And she wonders why he's risking his life to help her. So Sakamoto recalls the moment when he gave AIA a present, but she realized he's covered in blood. So she knows that he killed people to buy it. She mentions that she doesn't want it, and she tells him they can't be together if he doesn't change his ways. She jumps off and she's about to fall to her death. So he rushes to save her and they crash into the ground. But she notes that she survived thanks to the snow. She knows that he would miss her if she dies. And she tells him that everyone's loved by someone. So he should stop killing people and focus on saving them instead. We return to the present as Shin cries after he reads Sakamoto's mind. And he tells Shin they shouldn't kill people. The twins attack him, but he carries their attacks. And they realize that they need to work together to defeat him. So they decide to use their ultimate move. And they start attacking relentlessly. But he easily dodges their attacks. They can't believe it because nobody has ever survived. After they used their ultimate technique. And they decide to do it again. But Sakamoto suddenly knocks Bacho out. Sunhai charges in, but Sakamoto destroys his weapon. And Sunhai is surprised that he was able to break it, because it's extremely durable. He realizes that he can't defeat Sakamoto. So he decides to target Lu instead. But Shin throws him to the ground. And Sakamoto smashes him with a refrigerator. She asks them who they are. But Sakamoto tells her they just work at a convenience store. And she finds them amusing. We see the boss waiting for the key, as he wonders why the twins haven't returned. But Sakamoto arrives. And the boss realizes that he was able to defeat the twins. Lu threatens to kill him. So he begs for his life and she beats him up. Since he killed her parents. Shin thinks he deserves another beating. But Sakamoto kills him in his mind again, telling him to stay out of it. Lu thinks she has done enough, saying her father told her she shouldn't kill people. And they use her key to open the vault. They realize it's full of treasures. But Shin notes that it contains strange items. And he reads a notebook, which mentions that it's full of the clan head's most treasured items. She wonders what her father left behind, and she sees a ball of liquor with a note, which mentions that she should drink it when she's of age. So she decides to share it with everyone, and Sakamoto shows her the pork bun she ruined. But she tastes it and tells them that it's still good. After that, Sakamoto returns to his store and Shin gives him an orange juice. But he's surprised to see Lu wearing an apron. She reveals that she will make pork buns while she works there. But he thinks she doesn't need to work, because she already inherited her clan's treasures. But she calls him an idiot, saying she will never use her family heirlooms to pay for her daily needs. So they start to argue, but Sakamoto tells him to be quiet. And he mentions that he was moved by the reason why Sakamoto decided to stop killing. So he shows Shin the family rules, telling him to follow it, so he reads it. Realizing the first rule is that they should never kill people. But we see a group watching them. And they know that Sakamoto has a huge bounty on his head. The next day when Lu gets to the store, Shin yells at her for being late for work. He checks out their goods, but he sees a detergent in a refrigerator, and he asks her why she put it there. So she explains that it doesn't matter where they put the items, because the customers will find it anyway. He thinks she has never worked before. But she reveals that she used to help her father bury his victims. And he tells Sakamoto to fire her, because she's ruining the peaceful atmosphere. But he tells Shin to stop being mean to her, and he starts giving them orders, as they realize that he isn't acting like his usual self. The real Sakamoto joins them. So his friends wonder what's happening, but he completely ignores them. The imposter tries to stab him, but he dodges, so the man pulls out his gun. But Sakamoto threatens him with a cutter. He knows that the imposter is a hitman named Nagumo. And he realizes that Sakamoto hasn't lost his touch. Shin wonders why he wasn't able to read Nagumo's mind. But he laughs at Shin and Lu because he was able to deceive them. So they hit him and they ask Sakamoto about him. He mentions that he's only 18. But Sakamoto reveals that they used to work together. So he knows that Nagumo is 27. Shin and Lu beat him up for lying to them. But he mentions that Sakamoto has a 1 billion yen bounty on his head. Shin doesn't believe him. But he tells them the bounty was just posted the other day. So a few hitmen already know about it. A man suddenly arrives to deliver pizza and he gives it to Sakamoto. But he turns out to be a hitman, and he threatens to kill Nagumo if they don't cooperate. But they ignore him and Nagumo suddenly strangles him from behind, telling them he wasn't lying about the bounty. He prepares to kill the man. But Sakamoto stops him. So Nagumo realizes that he's now against killing people. He wonders if Sakamoto can stop the hitmen in his group. So everyone feels threatened. But he explains that he's just joking, saying they only kill other hitmen. Sakamoto wonders who wants him dead. But Nagumo explains that he doesn't know, telling him everyone has their eyes on him because he took down the gang. That was after Nagumo leaves with the hitman. And Shin tries to follow him. But he suddenly disappears, as Shin wonders if he is on their side. We see a group of hitmen watching Sakamoto. And they think he looks pathetic, so they wonder why he has a bounty of 1 billion yen. But their leader tells them not to underestimate him, because he used to be in a notorious group known as the Order. He suddenly talks to them, saying he will make them suffer if they don't stop stalking him, and he destroys their camera. After that, Shin is worried that other hitmen will try to kill Sakamoto, who thinks they should keep a low profile, because they still don't know who their enemy is. But Hana suddenly appears, and she mentions that she's ready for tomorrow, reminding him that they'll be watching Sugar Bunny together. So he becomes nervous, as he realizes that he forgot about his promise to her. They head to the amusement park where Aya and Hana enjoy the rides. But Sakamoto and his friends are worried, because they could be attacked at any time. Hana mentions that the place is enormous, and she notes that their mascot looks cute. Aya tells everyone they will have fun together, but Sakamoto and Shin can't relax. Shin tells Lu they should protect him, so that he can spend time with his family. But she wonders how they will find the hitmen around them, since the place is so crowded. So Shin explains that he will use his powers to read everyone's minds. But he mentions that he needs to concentrate to do it. He tells Sakamoto that a hitman is approaching. And we see that he's disguised as a janitor. Lu distracts Hana while Sakamoto approaches the hitman, who tries to make his move. But he stabs him with his pen first, and his friends hide the man's body. They take him to a forest, where Shin mentions that Sakamoto avoided his vital organs. And he thinks it's amazing, because he knows that it's extremely difficult to pull off. Another hitman named Tatsu watches them from a distance. And he knows that Shin has psychic powers, so he wonders how he's supposed to reach Sakamoto. But he comes up with a plan, as he realizes that Shin won't be able to read anything if he just empties his mind. We see everyone riding a roller coaster, and Lu sees Tatsu saying he looks suspicious. But Shin tells her he isn't thinking about anything. But he thinks about his cover being blown. So Shin realizes that he is a hitman. He tells Sakamoto he's in trouble. And as the ride speeds up, Tatsu tries to shoot him. But he uses his bulletproof glasses to deflect it. Shin removes his safety bar, and as the ride approaches a loop, he jumps off and he disarms Tatsu. Breaking his restraints, he jumps away with him. But Tatsu kicks Shin, who barely manages to survive the fall. He prepares to fight Tatsu. But he notes that he can't read his mind. And he realizes that the roller coaster is about to hit him. So he jumps into the air, but Tatsu throws knives at him. And he tries to dodge them, but his leg gets hit. He starts to feel strange as he realizes that he was poisoned. And Tatsu tells him he's doomed. But he refuses to give up. Tatsu tells him he has the same eyes as Sakamoto, saying he knows that they both fear death. And he thinks it makes them weak, telling Shin he could have dodged the knives if he wasn't afraid to die. But he explains that Sakamoto fears death because he wants to protect his family, saying people fight harder when they're trying to defend something. Tatsu knows that Shin has been blinded by his poison, and the roller coaster is about to hit them again. So they jump up, but Shin lands on it. And he grabs onto Tatsu, trying to hit him. But he fights back as Shin realizes he's in trouble. So he reads everyone's minds. And he realizes that Sakamoto is at the Sugar Bunny show. So he jumps off with Tatsu. They crash into the Sugar Bunny's tent. And one of the performers becomes upset because they interrupted the show. Tatsu threatens to kill him. But the Sugar Bunny interferes, and we learn that it's Shin telling Tatsu he's ready for round 2. He thinks Shin doesn't stand a chance because he's still blind. But he manages to land a punch, and everyone thinks it's part of the show, so they start cheering for him. Tatsu attacks with his knives, but Shin counters with a devastating kick, and he wonders how Shin can see him. Aya talks to Sakamoto, but he keeps quiet. so she thinks he's enjoying the show. But we learn that he's giving Shin instructions while he's watching the fight. Katsu is getting destroyed, and he wonders what's happening, because Shin is reading his every move. He manages to cut the costume, but he realizes that Shin's eyes are closed. And Sakamoto tells him to end the fight. So he kicks Tatsu with all his might, knocking him out, as the host mentions that the Sugar Bunny just used his ultimate move. So everyone celebrates, and he's glad that he was able to protect Sakamoto. We see two other assassins, Boiled and Obiguro, at the park. And Boiled mentions they will be doing things his way. But he suddenly yells at Obiguro, and he tells her not to step on the ants, because they shouldn't kill anyone other than their target. Lu tells Shin to stop moving, and she gives him the antidote for his eyes. But he finds it painful, so he runs away. But she reminds him that she still needs to use the antidote on his other eye. She thinks he's lucky because Tatsu had the antidote with him. But he explains that it's just standard practice for someone who uses poison. Sakamoto wonders who hired him as Lu takes his poison knife and stabs him with it. She mentions that she will spill 1 drop of his antidote every second, telling him to talk before it's too late, but Shin reminds her that they still need to use it on his other eye. Tatsu reveals that he works for a company called Dondenkai, but he mentions that it's a toxic workplace, which always forces them to work alone. Shin wonders why Lu's threat worked on him, reminding him that he mocked them for fearing death. So he explains that he doesn't want to die. And he mentions that he only works part-time, so he isn't loyal to the company. He reveals that he's registered with the JA. But Lu doesn't know about it, so Shin shows her his license, and she realizes that it stands for the Japanese Association of Assassins. He explains that it manages professional hitman, revealing that he and Sakamoto used to be members. And he mentions that there are only 400 pros in Japan. Aya and Hana suddenly appear, and Hana recognizes Tatsu as the bad guy who got beat up. Aya wonders what they're doing there, so Shin tells her they're watching him practice for the show. And they leave to eat lunch together. Shin takes his knife, telling him to leave them alone. But he wonders why they spared his life. So Shin explains that they're just there to enjoy the amusement park. Hana gives him a band-aid, telling him she was impressed by his performance, and she bids him farewell. As they leave, we see that he has a knife and he uses it to remove his restraints. But we learn that he no longer wants to kill Sakamoto. We see Sakamoto and the others having lunch together, but Shin mentions that he has brain fog, thinking it's because of the antidote. He notes that he won't be able to read minds because of it. So Lu tells Sakamoto they should call it a day. But Aya realizes that they're acting strange, so she wonders if they're hiding something. We see Tatsu in the restroom as Boyle suddenly appears behind him. And Obeguru takes him down. She tries to intimidate him, but Boyle tells her she's a nice girl, so she shouldn't spread her legs. Tatsu wonders what they're doing there, so Boyle tells him they will finish his job, as Obeguru reminds him that the company will punish him for failing to kill Sakamoto, so he thanks them for their help. And Boiled mentions that the scar on his face remembers Sakamoto. So Obeguru wonders if he was the one who gave him the scar. But Boyle tells her he just tripped and fell the other day, as Tatsu notes that they're both weirdos. But he knows that they're the most brutal pair the Dondenkai has ever seen, because they killed 100 people 2 years ago, so he thinks Sakamoto and his friends don't stand a chance. We return to Sakamoto as Shin tells Aya they're not hiding anything. And Hana asks them if they don't like the amusement park, but they tell her they're having a great time. Shin and Lu stay alert as Sakamoto's family enjoys the rides. And they all have a great time. Later that day, Lu tells Sakamoto that the park is open and well lit, so the assassins won't attack them there. But Aya and Hana want to check out the haunted house, and they realize it's where they might get attacked. The guide welcomes everyone to the ward of whales, saying it's filled with the spirits of patients who died there, and she warns them that no one has left the place alive. Lu is frightened, so she starts drinking. And they enter the operating room, as Boiled watches them through a hidden camera. Sakamoto's family is having fun, but he tells his friends to stay alert, and a hitman suddenly attacks them from behind. Aya and Hana think he's just a zombie, but Sakamoto beats him up and he suddenly stops moving. So everyone wonders what happened, but Shin is impressed by Sakamoto's moves. They see the hitman's license, realizing he was just a rookie, but Boiled and Obiguro continue to observe them. Abiguro looks forward to fighting Sakamoto, but Boyle tells her not to touch him, because he has a score to settle with him. She promises to let Boyle fight him, thinking Sakamoto is his friend. But he tells her it's not the case. In a flashback we see Sakamoto at the Hitman training center. When Boyle tells him he defeated one of his friends during practice. But he mentions that he isn't there for revenge, and Sakamoto repeatedly hits the target, as Boyle realizes that he's extremely skilled. They start spending time together, and we see them at a restaurant, as Boyle mentions that everyone's celebrating Valentine's Day. But he mentions that they don't have time for love. But a group of girls suddenly approach Sakamoto, and one of them gives him a gift, saying she wants him to be her Valentine. He finds his locker filled with presents. And he sees Nagumo, who reveals that he also received gifts from the girls. He asks Sakamoto about Boyle, but he mentions that he doesn't know him, and he tells him he can have the chocolates. We return to the present, as Abaguro realizes that Boyle has a beef with Sakamoto, so she promises not to get in his way. Sakamoto defeats a group of hitmen, and Lou continues to drink, telling Shin it's just a good luck remedy, but he realizes that it's alcohol. They see a suspicious door, and they hear someone banging on the other side, but Lou is already drunk so she opens it. And they get attacked by countless assassins. Sakamoto tries to fight them off, but he realizes that his family is in danger, and Boyle suddenly attacks him and he gets separated from his family. Boyle wanders as Sakamoto remembers him, but he explains that he doesn't, and Boyle is sad hearing this. Shin defeats the hitman and he sees Aya and Hana on the ground. Realizing they're unconscious, Obeguru appears behind him, telling him he's no match for her, but Louis suddenly kicks her away, as he realizes that she's using drunken fists to fight. We return to Sakamoto as he wonders where his family is. But Boyle tells him to look for them himself. So he becomes upset and he charges in. But there's an explosion and Boyle smashes him to the ground. Obeguro hears them fighting, so she gets distracted and Lou tries to punch her. But she blocks the attack and shakes Lou's head, which makes her dizzy. She orders her men to tie Shin up. And they threaten him with a chainsaw, as Abe Guru mentions that she wants to see what Luke can do. So she decides to play a game, with her telling Lou she needs to land a hit every 10 seconds. Or her man will kill Xian. She tells Lou she's running out of time. But she starts crying saying she can't do it. So they realize she's an emotional drunk. Boyle notes that it's been 5 years since Sakamoto retired. So he's nowhere near as good as he used to be. He tries to fight back but Boyle uses his bombs to take him down, telling him he's no match for his Super Bowl bombs. He suddenly remembers Boyle, because he always gave his equipment ridiculous names. And we learn that Sakamoto found him cringy. But he recalls seeing a note written by Boyle. Boyle continues to attack him, as he reveals that he always looked up to him. But he mentions that he's upset because Sakamoto has become a weakling, who can't even protect his family. He attacks Sakamoto with his rocket dynamite punch, which sends him flying and he thinks the fight is over. But he suddenly feels threatened as Sakamoto gets back up, saying he knows what Boyle's bombs are made of. He mentions that he now remembers him, and we see that he's back in his prime, telling Boyle he will show him what he can do. Obeguro starts fighting Lou, who dodges her attack and counters with her hair. But she mentions that she just got lucky. The man reset the timer, and Shin notes that he's still alive because Lou is putting up a good fight, but he tells her to fight seriously. Abaguro smashes her to the ground, and she thinks the fight is over. But Lou suddenly starts laughing and she continues to drink. So Abaguro attacks her again, but she can't hit her so she grabs onto her. But she still misses and Lou counters with a kick. Abe Guru is impressed, telling Lou to try killing her. But she explains that she can't because it's against the family rules. But Abe Guru tells her she isn't a part of Sakamoto's family, and she calls her an idiot, but Lou becomes angry hearing this. Abe Guru notes that she's getting stronger, and she gets pushed back, as she realizes that Lou is about to finish her off. But Lou's fist barely touches her, and she suddenly sobers up, asking Shin what's happening. Abe Guru appears to be upset since Lou didn't finish her off. But she's actually happy because she has finally found a worthy rival. We return to Sakamoto as Boyle wonders how he lost his weight. But he thinks it doesn't matter, because he's convinced that Sakamoto has already lost his touch. But he suddenly charges in and punches him away. Boyle struggles to keep up with him, and he uses his rocket dynamite punch to fight back. But Sakamoto destroys it and continues to beat him up, as he realizes that Sakamoto is back in his prime. He throws his Super Ball bombs, but Sakamoto catches all of them, and uses them to attack Boyle, who wonders why he's no match for Sakamoto. So he explains that he's fighting to protect his family, revealing that they give him the strength to fight on. We see a couple on the Ferris wheel, and the boy goes in for a kiss, but Sakamoto and Boiled crash into a nearby cab, and Boiled admits that he still respects Sakamoto. Aya wakes up, but she wonders why they're no longer in the haunted house. So Shin tells her he doesn't know what happened, but she wonders why his clothes are dirty. So he explains that it's because of the zombies, and he leaves to look for Sakamoto. We return to the Ferris wheel as Sakamoto and Boyle leave the cab, and the conductor asks them if they're okay. So Boyle tells her she shouldn't embarrass them by asking them if they got hurt, but she tells him he needs to pay for the damages. After that, Boyle admits defeat and he promises to leave Sakamoto alone. But he completely ignores him. He starts eating a pork bun, and Boyle mentions that he wants to taste it, but Sakamoto gives him his leftovers, saying he needs to save the rest for his family. Shin is surprised to see him, wondering how he lost weight, and he starts taking pictures of him. Boyle asks him what he'll do about his bounty, telling him the Don Denkai will keep trying to kill him. But he freaks out as he sees Aya, who realizes that there's a bounty on his head. She asks them to explain what's happening, so Sakamoto reveals that Hitman have been trying to kill him. And she wonders why he didn't tell her about it, so he explains that he didn't want her to worry. But she reminds him about the sixth family rule, which mentions that they aren't allowed to keep secrets from each other, telling him to deal with his problems without hiding anything from her. Everyone enjoys the parade, but Shin wonders how they can get rid of the bounty, so Sakamoto mentions that they should take down the client. But Obiguro thinks they won't be able to find him, because the bounties are managed by the Ja. Boyle thinks their boss might be able to help them, but he mentions that he doesn't know where to find him, and he leaves with Obiguro. Shin wonders what they should do next, because they don't know where to find the Don Denkai headquarters. But Sakamoto mentions that he knows someone who can help them. The next day Sakamoto regains all the weight he lost, and Shin wonders how it happened, but Lu isn't surprised because he never stops eating. They head to a video rental store, where Shin sees a film about the Don Denkai, and he asks Sakamoto about the shop, so he reveals that it sells information in movie form. They watch the film together, and we learn that the Don Denkai is a hitman organization with over 50 members. It was founded by an assassin, who turned a building into their headquarters, but he ends up dying at the end of the movie. The shopkeeper tells them to pay over 700,000 yen for the film, and Sakamoto uses his credit card to pay for it. But Shin notes that it's expensive, asking him how he still has that much money, so he reveals that he still has his savings from his bachelor days. As he's about to leave, the shopkeeper warns him to be careful, because someone close to him might be involved. So Sakamoto asks him what he means, but he mentions that he can't reveal everything, because the film isn't available yet. We see Nagumo with the other members of the order, and a hitman named Yo asks him about Sakamoto. But he plays dumb and Hio finds him sus, so he tries to stab him, but Nagumo tells him to save his knife for the main dish. Another hitman named Shushiba mentions that they're causing a mess, but an assassin named Saragi warns him about his food, so he calls the chef and he stabs his hand, asking him why there are onions in his dish. A man named Arya thanks them for coming, and he reveals that he's from the Ja, saying he's glad to see all the members of the order. But Hill mentions that 4 of them didn't attend, and Shushiba notes that 3 of them are always absent. But he wonders why their oldest member, Takamura, isn't there, thinking he must have forgotten because of his age. Hiria reveals that someone has been killing the hitmen in the Ja, so they've decided to ask for the order's help, to hunt down the man responsible for it. Sakamoto and his friends reach the Don Denkai headquarters, and he thinks they should avoid fighting, so they decide to sneak in. We see 2 guards in the hall, and Shin and Sakamoto take them down, but they remove their spy outfits, mentioning that they got bored of it. Shin notes that the boss's room is on the top floor, and they need to climb up from the 2nd floor window to get there. Another guard hears someone knocking at the window, and he opens it to check who's there, but he suddenly gets electrocuted. Sakamoto and his friends tie him up, and they make their way to the boss's room, but they realize everyone is already dead. Nagumo mentions that he killed all of the Don Denkai officials, and he threatens to kill Sakamoto. He suddenly appears behind Shin and stabs his neck. So Lu panics, but Nagumo laughs at them as they realize that it was just a prank. So they beat him up, as he reveals that everyone was dead by the time he got there. He mentions that 100 hitmen have been murdered over the past few months, and the killer always leaves an X at the scene, so the order decided to call him X. Lou asks Nagumo about the order, so he reveals that there is special task unit, and only the best hitmen can join them. They report directly to the JA, and they take down dangerous assassins to maintain order in the world. He mentions that Sakamoto used to be one of them, and he tells him to be careful of X, saying the killings started when his bounty was posted. The next day, Sakamoto returns to his store and they see a hitman looking for him. So Lou tells Hana to press a button, which knocks the man out. Aya mentions that the hitmen are bad for business, but she thinks it's okay, because they're buying band-aids from their shop. Hana gives the hitmen band-aids, and they mention that her father is amazing. But he recalls that Nagumo told him he needs to be careful, because he's nowhere near as good as he used to be. So he tells his friends they need to get stronger. Sakamoto rides with Hana, and everyone notes that he's ridiculously fast, while Shin reads the customers' minds, and gives them the items they're looking for. Lou decides to train by drinking alcohol and a man enters the store. But she instantly attacks him and he wonders how she knew he was an assassin. We see a hitman named Heisuke as he feeds his bird Paisu. But we learn that its food is worth 10,000 yen. And he barely has enough money to feed himself. So he hasn't been eating well. But he thinks he will be able to solve his problem by collecting the bounty on Sakamoto. We see Shin and Lou cleaning at the store, as they mention that it's damaged, because countless hitmen have been trying to kill Sakamoto. He notes that they need to do major repairs. But Shin mentions that they need money for that. And he shows them an ad about a paintball tournament, which has a prize of 1 million yen. But Heisuke suddenly joins them, and he mentions that he's looking for Taro Sakamoto, telling them to hand him over. They realize that he's a hitman. But he doesn't recognize Sakamoto, so they tell him they don't know the person he's looking for. He mentions that the store is called Sakamoto's, but they explain that there are countless stores with that name. Shin reads his mind and he realizes that Heisuke is sad, because he won't be able to eat sushi. So Shin realizes that he's an idiot. He mentions that someone told him he can find Taro Sakamoto in the shop. But Shin tells him it's a common name, so there are millions of Taro Sakamotos in Japan. Heisuke thinks he'll never find him. So he starts crying, as he mentions that he doesn't have enough money to eat breakfast. They hear his stomach growling and he leaves the shop. But they realize that he's staring at them, so they decide to give him some pork buns. He thanks them for the food, but Shin notes that he's the dumbest hitman he has ever met. That evening we see Heisuke fixing his tent, which his grandmother gave him, but he notes that it's in terrible condition. He recalls that his boss told him to quit, because he doesn't have what it takes to be a hitman, and he's determined to prove him wrong. But there's suddenly a gust of wind which causes his tent to collapse. He sees the ad about the paintball tournament, and he thinks he can buy a home with the 1 million yen cash prize. So he decides to participate. The next day we see everyone preparing for the tournament, as Shin and Sakamoto receive their earpieces, which they can use to communicate. But Lou decides to just cheer for them, since she thinks it's a barbaric game. He reminds her that they're doing it for the money, but he thinks it's okay if she doesn't join them, because they don't need her help to win the contest. They see Heisuke arguing with a girl, who tells him he can't take part by himself, since it's a team competition. So he falls into despair, but he sees Sakamoto and his friends and he begs them to help him. So they reluctantly allow him to join their team. The hosts welcomes everyone to the event, telling the players they will be eliminated if they're hit. And she tells them to enjoy the game, saying everyone will clean this street after the event. The players get into position, but Heisuke wonders what he's supposed to do. So Shin just tells him to shoot their enemies. We see a team watching them, thinking they're all noobs. But as the game begins, Heisuke shoots all of them in an instant. Shin is impressed by his skills, and the men can't believe what happened. Another team attacks them from behind, so Shin shoots them down and we see players behind Sakamoto. But he disarms them and takes them out. The host thinks his team will win the game, and Heisuke is happy to have friends that watch his back. But Shin can't believe he already trusts them. He notes that they're incredibly skilled, and he offers to serve as their decoy, telling them to cover him. But we see Lou has been drinking, and she calls Sakamoto by his full name. So Heisuke checks the picture of his target. He thinks it looks nothing like Sakamoto. But Lou mentions that his appearance changed because he gained weight, saying his glasses and hair are still the same. Shin interrupts her and he mentions that the picture isn't Sakamoto. But Heisuke doesn't believe him, and he points his gun at Sakamoto. He mentions that he will get the prize and the bounty, But the other players start shooting them, so they run for cover. Shin and Sakamoto take them out. But Hazik calls Paisu, who gives him his rifle. And he aims at Sakamoto. Shin realizes that he's holding a real gun. And he pulls the trigger, but Sakamoto deflects it with his hand. Hazik realizes that killing him won't be easy. So he decides to find a good spot. And Shin prepares to run after him, but Sakamoto tells him they still need to defeat the other players. Hazik realizes that his target was right under his nose. And he starts crying, because he thought Shin and Sakamoto were his friends. But he's determined to complete his mission, so that he can make his mark as a hitman. The game reaches its climax, as the players continue to shoot each other. But Shin can't find Hazek's key. So he decides to look around. But Sakamoto tells him he needs to be careful when dealing with a sniper, saying they must find Hazek's key without giving away their position. So he carefully looks around. But Hazek shoots a mirror and the bullet almost hits him. So Shin wonders how he was able to find them. We see Paisu flying around, as it tells Hazek that Sakamoto dodged his bullet. And he uses his earpiece to talk to Shin, who mentions that he almost hit Sakamoto with a random ricochet. But he knows that it wasn't random, because Hazek's bullet has an absurd spin rate. So he knows that it was designed to bounce. Hazek reveals that he's using triple rebound rounds. So it's impossible to track their trajectory. Shin reminds him that they're friends, but he explains that he needs to do his job as a hitman. And he opens fire, so Shin and Sakamoto start running away. They dodge the bullets, but they reach a dead end. So they turn back and they find a place to hide. Hazek recalls that when he was young, he was never able to measure up to his peers, because he wasn't good at anything. But he discovered his talent for shooting, and he started working as a hitman, telling his superiors that he's an excellent sniper. But one of them looks down on him, telling him their company doesn't need a one-trick pony. We see him in the middle of a fight, but he's completely helpless, and his companions realize that he can't even handle a knife. So they make him do the paperwork, but he struggles to complete them, and his superior tells him to quit, because he doesn't have what it takes to become a hitman. He ends up getting fired and he starts living a miserable life. But he sees the bounty on Sakamoto's head, so he becomes determined to take him out and prove himself to everyone. We return to the present as Hazek thinks out loud, saying he needs to prove that he's an awesome sniper. But Shin reminds him that his mic is still on. So he realizes that Shin heard everything. He tells him to stop caring about what other people think, because he doesn't need to prove himself to anyone, and he screams into the mic. So Hazek becomes startled. And we learn that when people are surprised, Shin can read their thoughts from further away, and he sees Hazek on a roof. Hazek removes his earpiece, but he realizes Sakamoto is looking at him. Sakamoto throws a pebble with tremendous force, and it shatters his rifle and knocks him down. He can't believe how powerful Sakamoto is. And he realizes that he never even stood a chance. After that, the host announces that Sakamoto's team won the game. And Hazek starts crying, thinking he's a terrible sniper. Shin tells him to man up, but he thinks they will never understand him, because they don't know what it's like to be weak. But Sakamoto mentions that he's the best sniper he has ever seen. And Hazek is touched by his words. Shin gives him his share of the money, but he realizes that it's only 50 yen, so Shin reminds him that he destroyed the town with his bullets. So they needed to pay for the repairs. Sakamoto returns to the shop, and Aya thinks it's a shame that even though he won the contest, they had to spend all the money to fix the town. But she tells him it's okay because he was able to return safely. Shin wonders how Sakamoto asked her out. And he starts reading her thoughts, but Sakamoto kills him in his mind again, reminding him not to use his powers on them. We see Sakamoto with his family as he watches Hana in her classroom. And Aya is glad that Shin and Lu are watching over the store today. He thinks they're doing fine. But we see them arguing in the shop, because Lu is wearing Shin's apron. He mentions that he's the one in charge while Sakamoto isn't around. But she thinks he's acting like a child. He reminds her that he can read her mind. But she tells him to stop doing it without her permission. Hazek joins them and he asks for free pork buns. But he sees them arguing, as Lu mentions that she doesn't like spending time with Shin, because he keeps reading her thoughts. He becomes upset hearing this and he walks away. As Hazek wonders if he can eat the pork buns on the ground. But she just tells him to leave. She thinks about Shin, as she notes that she has never seen him like that before. But a group of men suddenly enter the shop, and they think she's Shin because she's wearing his name tag. So they take her away, their leader. Tanaka mentions that Shin disappeared from the lab 10 years ago. And they think he dyed his hair so that he can disguise himself as a girl. The driver named Saba thinks they have the wrong person. But Tanaka becomes upset because he's convinced that they have captured their target. He reveals that the lad performed experiments to create psychics. And Shin is the only subject they worked on. So he has the ability to read minds. Tanaka finds him creepy, thinking nobody likes him because of his powers. And he calls him a miserable loser. But Luz suddenly attacks him, telling him not to pick on Shin, because he's a much better person than him. She reveals that she's not Shin. And Tanaka can't believe it. But Saba tells him he needs to learn to listen to people. Meanwhile, Shin returns to the store. But he realizes that Lu isn't there, and Sakamoto arrives with his family. He asks Shin what's going on. So he explains the situation, and Sakamoto reveals that he knows where to find her, because he put a tracker on his name tag. We return to Tanaka as he mentions that the lad will kill them, because they got the wrong person. He thinks they can just pretend that Lu is Shin. But Saba tells him his plan will never work, and she thinks she deserves to be kidnapped, because of everything she said to Shin. But he suddenly arrives with Sakamoto, who tells the kidnappers to set her free. Tanaka realizes that they found their target, so they can return to the lab without fearing for their lives. He sends his men to stop Shonan Sakamoto, but they're no match for them, and Lu tells Tanaka to apologize before things get worse. But he tells her to shut up, telling her they'll get into trouble if they return empty-handed. They realize that Shin is above them, so Tanaka orders Sabla to stop him, and he decides to do it, telling Tanaka to take the wheel for him. He prepares to fight Shin, as he mentions that he hates having an incompetent boss. And he suddenly becomes invisible. Shin can't see him and Saba knocks him down. But he lands on another car. Saba approaches Sakamoto, who grabs him by the neck. So he realizes that Sakamoto can see him. But he stabs the fuel tank, causing the bike to explode. Tanaka's group manages to escape, and he asks Saba if he was able to capture Shin. But he explains that he forgot about him. Sakamoto mentions that the tracker stopped at the Okatabe Museum. And he asks Shin about Tanaka's group. So he reveals that they were set by the lab, which is the research facility where he grew up. He mentions that they're a bunch of weirdos. But he notes that they weren't dangerous, so he wonders why they sent Tanaka's group. Sakamoto and Shin head to the Okatabe Museum, as Shin mentions that the lab is hidden in the basement. They realize it's crowded and two girls welcome them to the museum, asking them if they want a souvenir photo. Shin explains that they're in a hurry, but the girls tell them it will only take a second, so they decide to take a picture. And Shin likes it, so he pays 5,000 yen to get a copy. He notes that the dinosaur head is perfect for hiding their faces. So they decide to wear it, as he leads Sakamoto to the lab. We see Tanaka in a lab where he takes Lu to his boss Kashima, telling him she's the person he's looking for. But he notes that she looks nothing like Shin, and he threatens to kill Tanaka if he's lying. Saba betrays him, telling Kashima he knows where to find the real Shin. So Tanaka gets taken away. Shin tells Sakamoto how to access the secret passage and Adora appears. But when Shin enters Okatabe as the password, it triggers the alarm as the system mentions that there's an intruder. A bear suddenly starts shooting them, so Sakamoto takes it down. But another one appears, so Shin takes a spear, which he uses to stab the bear's head. But the system detects that the bears have been defeated, so it activates a dinosaur, which attacks them with its tail. Sakamoto thinks Hana would like it and he wants to show it to her, so he decides not to destroy it. It continues to attack them, as Shin realizes that there's a device in its mouth, so he tells Sakamoto to shoot it with his electric gun. He tells Shin his plan is brilliant and the dinosaur tries to attack him, but he smashes its tail to the ground and shoots the device, causing the dinosaur to stop moving. But the system activates it again and it starts attacking relentlessly. Sakamoto tries to take another shot, but it destroys his pistol, so he becomes upset and he decides to get rid of it. It charges at him, but he smashes the device in its mouth and destroys its body with a devastating blow. We see the scientists in the lab as they hear the commotion. But a guard tells them to get back to work. One of them, named Ishikawa, explains that they need to rest, because they haven't slept in 3 days. But the guard tells them to finish their research if they want to be freed, and he kicks Ishikawa, who falls to the ground. But he mentions that the research will never succeed. So the guard threatens to kill him. But Shin suddenly takes him out. The scientists recognize him, and he asks them about the director, so Ishikawa reveals that he's locked up in the lowest floor, saying the lab was taken over by a group of assassins. Ishikawa reveals that 1 year ago, Kashima arrived with his group, and they told the scientists to invent new weapons for them. Ishikawa adds that he is their boss, but there are other leaders who don't wear suits. He tells Shin and Sakamoto they need to leave. But they see the leader of the floor approaching, so the scientists help them hide in the locker. We cut to Tanaka, who begs the guards to let him out. But Lu kicks him and she tries to break out of the cell. But the director Asakura tells her she can't break the bars with a rock, and he reveals that he has a plan. We see the leader of the floor named Horiguchi, who asks the scientists what they're hiding, and Ishikawa plays dumb. But he stabs his hand because he knows that they're hiding something. And Shin becomes upset, so he comes out of hiding. Horiguchi realizes that he's there to stop their research, and he wants to show him the beauty of his work. So he takes out a syringe and stabs him from behind. He mentions that it's time for an experiment, and he activates a switch which changes Shin's speaking pattern. He reveals that he placed a needle in Shin's head, which messes up the signals in his brain, and he starts attacking, but he struggles to hit Horiguchi. But Sakamoto joins the fight and he knocks him out with a single punch. He reveals that he was stuck in the locker, and he's glad that he was finally able to escape, telling Shin he will help him clean up his childhood home. We see Saragi and Shishiba approaching the museum, because Nagumo told them that the place is connected to X. But they know his information isn't the most reliable, so they decide to investigate it themselves. Heisuke heads to the store as he reveals that he found 500 yen. So he wants to buy some food. But he realizes that Hana is the only one there, and she's sad because she forgot to tell Sakamoto and his friends that they were supposed to attend a school event together. So he promises to find them for her, and Paisu flies off to search for them. Meanwhile, in the lab's basement, Lu becomes angry because she thinks Asakura was the one who got her kidnapped. But he tells her that isn't the case, and reminds her that he's also a prisoner. She realizes he's on her side, and asks him to tell her everything he knows. Horiguchi recognizes Sakamoto as a legendary hitman, and mentions that his power and speed are impressive. But he tells Sakamoto he needs to lose weight. He realizes that there's a needle stuck in his neck, and he tries to attack Horiguchi, but he ends up hitting Shin instead. He notes that his body moved on its own, and Horiguchi reveals that his needle makes them confuse friends for foes, but he suddenly punches Horiguchi, telling him he just needs to think about hitting Shin whenever he attacks, and Horiguchi realizes that he's a worthy opponent. We return to Asakura as he reveals that he was locked up in the cell because he didn't cooperate with the guards. Lu wonders why she was kidnapped, but he tells her he doesn't know, and he recalls that it all started because Tanaka mistook her for Shin. So she starts blaming him. Asakura mentions that he knows Shin, and he reveals that he accidentally gave him psychic powers by getting him mixed up in his research. In a flashback, we see Asakura looking after Shin because his friend asked him to do it, but he suddenly disappeared. So Asakura decided to raise Shin, who was with him while he was studying how to give the human brain supernatural powers. He thinks his research will make everyone happy if he figures things out, so he's determined to succeed. But he struggles to raise Shin while he works on his experiment. The other scientists think he's just wasting his time because his research will never work, but Shin tells them he believes in him. One evening, Asakura realizes he's making progress, but Shin suddenly wakes up and drinks the serum he's working on. It causes him to throw up, so Asakura becomes worried, but he notes that Shin hasn't changed at all, so he thinks his experiment was a failure. But he realizes that Shin can read minds, and he starts telling everyone what they're thinking. But they find him creepy, so they start avoiding him. And Asakura wants to cure him, but Shin tells him he wants to keep his powers. Asakura feels guilty because he got Shin mixed up in his research, but he becomes upset and runs off. We return to the present, as Asakura mentions that he doesn't know if he can face Shin. But Lu notes that he's happy with his powers. She mentions that she also have a fight with him, and she tells Asakura they should apologize together. She reveals that Sakamoto has a family rule, that they should make peace when they fight, and Asakura is determined to make it up to Shin. He uses a solution to melt the lock, and Lu wonders why he didn't use it earlier. So he reveals that he wanted to stay there because he didn't want to help the others with their research. The door suddenly opens and the guard rushes to see what's wrong, but Lu suddenly knocks him out. Sakamoto hits Shin again, as Horiguchi reveals that he can turn the switch off, and he uses a drug to make his arm massive. He starts attacking them so Shin tries to fight back. But Horiguchi activates the switch again. And Shin ends up hitting Sakamoto. Horiguchi strengthens his leg and he pushes Shin back. Sakamoto tries to attack him from behind. But he activates the switch, so Sakamoto hesitates and he blows him away. He thinks even the legendary Hitman is no match for the power of science. And he stabs Shin repeatedly, saying he doesn't know why the boss is interested in his psychic powers. He thinks it's stupid, but Sakamoto tells him that it isn't true. And he mentions that he can prove it to him. Horiguchi decides to go all out and he suddenly becomes massive. So Shin is worried, but Sakamoto tells him he has a plan. Shin walks forward. But he turns around and Horiguchi prepares to take him out. But Sakamoto tells Shin he'll use his right hand, so he dodges and the attack lands on Horiguchi. They stick to the plan and Sakamoto delivers a devastating combo, which sends Horiguchi flying. After that, the scientists remove the needles from Sakamoto and Shin's neck. They think they owe Shin an apology. But he tells them he's happy with his power. And he mentions that he's working for Sakamoto. Ishikawa thanks him for looking after Shin. And he tells Sakamoto he was barely able to dodge his attacks, telling him he's amazing despite gaining weight. But he kills Shin in his mind again because he insulted his body. They make their way to the basement, as Sakamoto tells Shin not to underestimate the members of the order, because he's nothing compared to them. Sakamoto tells him to play dead if he sees one of them. But he suddenly activates a trap, so he pushes Shin to safety and he falls into a hole. We see Kashima with his friends Onigara and Takamito, as they realize that their men were killed by Shishima and Saragi. He recognizes them as members of the order, and he prepares to take them on. Shishima asks him if X is there, revealing that he's their target, but Kashima mentions that he doesn't know him. Shushiba tells him his group has violated JA regulations by manufacturing illegal weapons and forcing their hostages to do the work for them. He threatens to wipe them out, so Onigara and Takamino ask Kashima if they can kill him, and he tells them to do it. But Saraki suddenly cuts their heads off, so Kashima starts crying as he mentions they have families. He tells Shushiba and Saragi that they don't understand the value of life, and he removes his arm to reveal his weapon, as he tells them they don't deserve to be Hitman. Shushiba finds him ridiculous because he thinks he's better than them, even though he has killed countless people. Shushiba is about to trash talk his boss, but he suddenly attacks him, and he mentions that his kills are acceptable, because he's just following his boss's orders. But Shushiba breaks his neck, and he realizes that they're working for X. As they start to walk away, Kashima gets back up and he reveals that he has an artificial skeleton. But Sakamoto suddenly crashes into him and Shishima recognizes him. So he introduces him to Saraki, who thinks Sakamoto looks like a teddy bear. Kashima gets up again and he reveals that he also knows Sakamoto, because he's the only person who was able to injure his boss. Kashima is determined to kill him so that he can offer him to his boss. And he takes out his other weapons. Shin continues to make his way to the basement, but he suddenly senses a presence and he dodges Saba's attack. He asks him about Lu, but Saba explains that he doesn't know, because he's just following orders. He explains that he plans to save 20 million yen before he retires. But he doesn't like working overtime, so he wants to finish things quickly. He prepares to attack Shin from behind and he tries to fight back. But Saba kicks him away. He notes that he can read Saba's mind, so he knows where to find him, but he doesn't know how to protect himself, because he can't see his attacks. Saba knocks him down, but he mentions that he doesn't want to leave work early, so he tells Shin to put up a good fight. We return to Sakamoto as he starts fighting Kashima, wondering if he's even human. Shishima and Saraki tell Sakamoto they have to leave, so he bids them farewell, but Kashima blows him away. Saragi wonders if he'll be okay, and Shushiba notes that Kashima is tougher than he thought, so he thinks Sakamoto will struggle against him. But he thinks Sakamoto will come out on top, because he has known him for years. Saiba continues to beat Shin up, as he notes that he still hasn't killed him, because Shin is using his powers to avoid fatal attacks. But Saba rushes forward and he manages to stab Shin, who touches Saba with his bloody hands. But Shin tells him he's in trouble and he suddenly gets shot. As Haske joins the fight, Kashima thinks Sakamoto is pathetic, because he just keeps dodging his attacks. But he tells Kashima to leave because the lab is important to Shin. But he explains that his team is taking over the lab for the future of the Hitman industry, and he thinks Sakamoto's friends are getting slaughtered by his man. He prepares to fire his mouth cannon. But Sakamoto blocks it with his pencil, causing it to explode, and he explains that he isn't worried about his friends, because they can take care of themselves. We return to Shin as he mentions that Heisuke's timing is perfect. So he thinks he's like a hero. But Shin tells him he hates reading his mind. Saba realizes that he's dealing with a sniper who wants to stand out, and he thinks Heisuke won't be a threat once he finds him. He sees Saba hiding and he fires a bullet which ricochets in. Almost hits his head, so he turns invisible and runs away. But Heisuke notes that he can still hear him, so he fires 3 bullets which almost hit him. But Saba suddenly appears above him. He launches an invisible rod, which hits his shoulder and Heisuke falls to the ground. Saba reveals that his jacket can make anything inside it invisible, and he prepares to finish Heisuke off, but he fires a bullet which ricochets and hits Saba, who mentions that he lost his arm. So Heisuke tells him to surrender, but he reveals that he was just joking and he stabs Heisuke. He kicks the bullets away, as he wonders why Lu's friends are trying to save her, thinking they should just abandon her because she's a nuisance. He calls Heisuke a third-class hitman. But he refuses to give up, and he mentions that his friends consider him a first-class sniper, so he won't let them down. He calls out to Shin as Pica gives him a bullet, and he quickly reloads his rifle. He shoots the wall but the bullet doesn't hit Saba, so he thinks Heisuke missed his shot. But we see that the bullet hit a sprinkler which starts spraying water. And Shin appears behind him, as he realizes that they can see him because he's wet. Shin takes him down, telling him he isn't a threat if he can see him. And Heisuke tells Shin he was able to read his mind perfectly. But he reveals that he could barely understand what Heisuke was thinking. There's suddenly an explosion and we cut to Kashima, who reveals that the lab will self-destruct in 20 minutes, because his group has been exposed. But Sakamoto mentions that he can defeat him in 5 minutes. And Kashima charges in, telling Sakamoto he can't win because his body hinders his movements. Kashima reveals that his body is filled with weapons, because it was created in the lab, and Sakamoto mentions that he also has weapons. But we see that they're just office supplies. Kashima fires his hand cannon, but Sakamoto dodges his attacks and he takes out his mechanical pencil. Kashima thinks it's useless, but Sakamoto launches its lead at his eye. He mentions that he can defeat Sakamoto with his other eye, but he covers it with a sticker so Kashima can't see anything. Sakamoto sends him flying, telling him he's a third-class hitman, because he's relying on his weapons. But he gets back up and Sakamoto asks him if he's immortal. So he explains that he doesn't know, but he thinks he can't die. He mentions that his boss is the only one who accepted him, so he's willing to do anything for him. But a train suddenly appears, so they both jump to avoid it. But Kashima uses his wires to restrain Sakamoto, and he starts dragging him away. But Sakamoto manages to recover, and he uses a piece of paper to cut the wires, before throwing Kashima against the wall. We see a train driver who's bored, because he keeps doing the same thing every day, and he hopes something exciting will happen. Sakamoto and Kashima suddenly appear and they crash into the train. Kashima realizes that the lab is connected to the underground tunnel, and he finally understands why Sakamoto is his boss's favorite, thinking he's the ultimate hitman. Kashima wonders where he's hiding and Sakamoto suddenly kicks him, realizing he doesn't need to worry about killing him, since he's immortal in a flashback. We see Kashima as he kills a group of men who are messing with a stray cat. Everyone thinks he's crazy, but he still thinks he did the right thing, because he killed bad people. His boss suddenly appears and he kills everyone, telling Kashima he's a great person, because he's willing to dirty his hands for the sake of others. His boss draws an X on his mouth, and he mentions that he accepts him for who he is. We return to the present, as Kashima mentions that he wants to help his boss achieve his goal. But an old woman gets on the train, and Sakamoto tells him to stand up because he's in the priority seat. He realizes that Sakamoto has him cornered, and he starts beating him up. Kashima gets blown away, as he realizes that Sakamoto's power is absolutely insane. And he starts shooting him, but Sakamoto easily deflects the bullets. He continues to beat him up, but Kashima activates his chest cannon, which causes an explosion. Sakamoto falls off but he crashes into another train. And he quickly makes his way to the other side, so that he can continue his fight with Kashima. He thinks his boss will be pleased because he defeated Sakamoto. But the door suddenly opens, and he realizes that Sakamoto is still alive. So he freaks out and he throws the passengers at Sakamoto. But he saves all of them and he even gives the boy cookies. He punches Kashima away. And they reach a station where he delivers the finishing blow. After that, Sakamoto calls Shin and tells him he was able to defeat the leader. But Shin mentions that there are explosions in the lab. So Sakamoto tells him to hurry because it will collapse in 15 minutes. We return to the lab as everyone starts to panic. Because they have no idea what's happening. The ceiling falls on Lu. But Shin saves her and she apologizes for being mean to him. But he tells her it's okay, and he also apologizes for being harsh. Osakura greets Shin but he doesn't know what to say. And Shin mentions that the lab will collapse in 10 minutes. But Heisuke notes that there are still people inside. Asakura shows everyone a floor plan. And Shin uses his powers to find the people trapped inside. He asks his friends to save them. And he tells Asakura to follow him. As he realizes that Shin is using his powers to help everyone. We see Shushiba and Saragi in the control room. And they see a picture of X. Realizing he's the one behind everything. But Shushiba notes that they can't see his face. And Saragi thinks he's a force to be reckoned with. But Shushiba tells her it doesn't matter, because it's their job to get rid of him. We return to Xian, as he mentions that there are 2 people ahead of them. And he notes that there's another one to their left, so Asakura leaves to look for him. Shin sees a man sitting in front of him. But he suddenly freaks out as he senses a powerful killing intent. Which causes him to freeze. The man walks past him and tells Shin to say hi to Sakamoto for him. But as he turns around he realizes the man is already gone. We see everyone outside and Shin joins them. So the scientists ask him if he's okay. He mentions that the lab is gone. But they tell him not to worry, because they still have the research data in their minds. He realizes that they're all grateful to him, and they're glad he made it out alive. So he reminds them that he can read their minds. But they just laugh at him. Asakura tells Sakamoto and his friends to look after Shin. And they promise to take care of him. That evening we see them eating with Sakamoto's family. And Aya wonders what happened because they appear to be exhausted. So Shin tells her they went to the museum. He takes Lu's food while she's sleeping. But she becomes upset telling him she was saving the best for last. They start fighting over the food. But Sakamoto kills them in his mind. The next day we see that Shin and Lu aren't feeling well. Because they still haven't recovered from the fight at the lab. Lu struggles to place pork buns in a steamer. And Shin thinks they're doomed if a hitman attacks them. So Sakamoto decides to take everyone to a bathhouse. But Shin tells him it's a bad idea, because he's so tired that he can't even read minds. But Sakamoto tells him they need to recover, so that they can fight at their best, and Shin thinks it's a high priority mission. Everyone prepares to enter the hot springs, as Shin mentions that he's excited because it's his first time. But Sakamoto tells him to calm down. We see a man named Yuta who's running the family business. But we learn that he hates his job, and Sakamoto tells him they need towels. He pays the entrance fee but Yuta realizes that he looks familiar. And as he gets the towels for them, he checks the wanted poster. He realizes that Sakamoto is the legendary hitman, who has a 1 billion yen bounty on his head. But he tells Yuta to hurry up. We learn that he's also an assassin, but he's a total noob, and he never expected Sakamoto to show up in his bathhouse. He thinks it's his chance to hit it big. But Sakamoto becomes upset because he's taking too long. So he quickly gives them towels. As Shin and Sakamoto change in the dressing room, Yuta observes them as he notes that he doesn't want to get stuck running the family business, so he's determined to kill Sakamoto. Everyone starts taking a bath, and Yuta realizes that Sakamoto is defenseless. So he's confident that he can kill him. Shin and Sakamoto decide to try the hyperjet bath. And Shin mentions that it feels amazing. But Sakamoto tells him it's too weak. Yuta continues to observe them and he prepares to kill them. As Shin realizes that there's a high power button beside him. He decides to try it but as he presses it, Yuta activates his trap which sends Shin flying. He crashes to the ground and he mentions that jet baths are dangerous. But the kids are excited to give it a try. Yuta notes that it's strong enough to destroy a 3-ton truck. But he realizes that Sakamoto is enjoying it. Shin and Sakamoto head to the sauna, but Sakamoto thinks the temperature is too low. So Shin decides to heat the rim. But as he pours water into the stones, Yuta activates another one of his traps, which causes the stones to burn. Shin realizes that it's extremely hot and the room starts burning. But Sakamoto thinks the temperature is perfect. Uda can't believe it and Shin tries to withstand the heat, thinking it's nothing compared to Hitman training. The kids see a bonfire in the sauna, and they tell their father they want to try it, but he tells them they're still too young. Sakamoto leaves the solemn with Shin and he decides to try the cold bath, but Yuta freezes the water. Shin thinks the bath is broken, but Sakamoto tells him it's too warm, and the kids start playing on the ice. As Shin and Sakamoto enjoy the waterfall, Yuta adjusts the water pressure and it blows Shin away. But Sakamoto thinks it's just right. He continues to enjoy his day as Yuta tries to kill him. But it only makes him feel better. Sakamoto joins the girls and he lets Shin rest on chair. He buys an ice cream as the kids bid him farewell, as Yuta realizes that he can't kill him. Sakamoto starts playing ping pong with Lu, as Yuta recalls that his parents always wanted him to run the bathhouse. But he decided to leave the town because he wanted to become a hitman. And he failed to achieve anything. So he ended up returning to his parents. There are two men that start bullying him, because he failed as a hitman. And he tells them to mind their own business. But one of them knocks him down. They think he's pathetic, and they tell him he'll never get a proper job. But they start mocking the bathhouse, telling him it's in terrible condition. Sakamoto hears them, so he launches the ball at one of them and he knocks him out. His friend asks Yuta what he did to him, but Sakamoto throws his ice cream stick, which sends the man flying. Yuta realizes that Sakamoto knows he was trying to kill him. But he tells Yuta his bathhouse is amazing, and he leaves with the others. Uta notes that it's been years since he received a compliment, and he never expected it to come from a legendary hitman. So he calls his father and tells him he's ready to take over the business, because he realized that he doesn't want to become a hitman. The next day Sakamoto and his friends head to a restaurant, and Shin mentions that he still feels terrible, because he wasn't able to relax in the bathhouse. Lu shows him 2 colas and tells him one of them is our special blend. She wants him to guess which one it is without reading her mind. And he drinks one of them, but he realizes it's terrible and he can't believe he fell for it. And she tells him he'll be paying the bills today, saying family restaurants are fun. She reveals that she didn't always eat outside, because their family chef prepared meals for them. And he asks her if she still talks to people from the mafia. But she reveals that she doesn't like being around them, because she prefers a peaceful life. But a mafia member suddenly points his gun at Shin, and another one tries to shoot Sakamoto, who uses his fork to stop the bullets. Shin takes out the man who's threatening him, and Sakamoto throws the other one on the table. A waitress asks for their order, and he mentions that he wants a melon soda, but the man tells him he's too old for that. Lu asks him if he's Tang, and he tells her it's been a long time since they last met. But she can't believe he's still alive. He tells her their clan doesn't have a leader, and he begs her to return so that she can lead them. He mentions that Shin and Sakamoto are barbarians, so she shouldn't hang out with them, but she tells him she'll never return to the mafia. He stares at her, but he suddenly has a nosebleed because he can't resist her cuteness. She cries because her face is covered in blood. So Shin cleans her up, and we learn that Tang served as her clan's advisor, but he kept following her around. Shin reads his mind and realizes that he's proud, because she knows that he was always protecting her. But Shin thinks he's insane. She tells him she wants to stay with Sakamoto, so Tang realizes that he's standing in the way, and Shin asks him if he wants to fight. But he explains that he'll fight them the mafia way. And he promises to tell Sakamoto about the person who put a bounty on his head. If he wins, he mentions that he isn't interested, because he doesn't want them to take Lu, but she accepts the challenge. Shin reminds her that she'll be forced to return to the mafia if they lose, but she's confident that she can lead them to victory. Tang tells them to follow him, and he leads them to an underground room, where he tells them to dress up, because their dirty clothes will attract attention. So they change into their formal attire and he takes them to a casino. As Lu realizes that their bout won't be a contest of physical strength. His subordinates give them chips worth 30 million yen, and he mentions that he knows they're poor, so he prepared chips for them to use. He explains that they need to make more money than him to win, telling them they'll meet again in 2 hours. And Lu realizes that they need to gamble. Sakamoto tells her not to worry, because they can use Shin's psychic abilities to their advantage, so she thinks they can win. But Shin and Sakamoto reveal that they know nothing about gambling. And she notes that Tang isn't a good fighter, but he's extremely smart, so she thinks they're in trouble. They see the crowd gathering around him, and they're impressed that he already has 90 million yen. Shin can't believe he was able to triple his money in an instant, and he tells them he'll get Lu back, saying he's willing to bet everything on it. Shin thinks they should divide the chips, and he mentions that gambling is just a game of luck. But Lu thinks Tang suggests to the game because he knows a trick that can help him when he explains that gambling isn't a game of chance, because players can win using calculations and psychological warfare. He goes all in and wins the game, telling Sakamoto and his friends to show him what they can do. Shin knows nothing about gambling, but he decides to give it a try and figure things out as he plays. But the other players realize he's a total noob, and they think they can destroy him, so he's determined to prove them wrong. The game begins and they make their move. But he has no idea what's happening. Lao sees him, and she immediately realizes that he doesn't know how to play. So they start arguing. He drops his cards and the other players see them. So they realize he has a good hand, but they think he'll back out if they bluff. So they tell him he'll never win with his cards. But he knows that they're bluffing, so he goes all in and wins. 12 million yen. Sakamoto plays roulette and he places his chips on red. The man in charge of the game thinks he'll never win, because he placed a magnet in the roulette, so he can control where the ball will land. It's about to land on black, so he thinks it's all over for Sakamoto, but he launches one of his chips to keep the roulette spinning, and manages to win the game. Tang's subordinate thinks Sakamoto and his friends are cheating, because they keep winning, but Tang tells him not to interfere, because he already expected them to play dirty. He uses his genius intellect to win at blackjack, and his subordinates think he's amazing, because he can memorize the cards and predict when the next card will be a 10. In a flashback we see Tang getting beat up by his clanmates, because they think he's too weak to be in their clan. But Lu suddenly attacks one of them, so they run away and she asks him if he's okay. She realizes that he's one of her relatives, and she asks him why he let the others beat him up. So he explains that he allowed them to win, so that they would get into trouble after they're done with him. He realizes that he just came up with a flimsy excuse. But she thinks he's brilliant, and she tells him his brain is his greatest weapon. He notes that it's the first time he has felt accepted in his life, and he wants to stand by her side, so he decides to do his best to make it to the top, until he finally becomes the brain of the clan. We return to the present, as Tang realizes that he is tied with Sakamoto's team, and he tells them they need to break the tie. His subordinate suggests shooting them to death, but Tang tells him to back off and suggests playing a game of poker. But Sakamoto reveals that he doesn't know the rules, so they decide to play an easier game instead. Tang explains that the team with the Joker at the end loses, and Shin thinks they'll win because he can read Tang's mind. But he sees Lu crying, so he realizes that she has the Joker. And Tang tells her he won't go easy on her. He uses her expression to find the Joker, but he takes it because he wants her to be happy. He tells Shin to take a card from his hand, and he tries to read his mind. But Tang knows about his powers, and he wonders how far Shin can read into his thoughts. He realizes that Tang's mind is filled with complex calculations, which overwhelms his brain, and he collapses as Tang notes that his plan worked. Tang's subordinate takes the Joker, and he tells Sakamoto to pick a card. He gets the Joker, but he immediately returns it and takes another card. But Tang knows that he cheated, so he warns him that he's out of the game if he does it again. The game continues, and we see that Sakamoto and Tang are the only ones left. Sakamoto has the Joker and Tang tells him his poker face is impressive. But he knows where to find the Joker, so he prepares to take the other card. But Sakamoto stops him and he struggles to pull it out, as Sakamoto instantly switches his cards. Tang pulls out the card, but he realizes that he got the Joker. And his subordinates suddenly stop the game, as one of them tells him they don't like the way he does things. They all call him a nerd and he thinks it's all over for him. But Sakamoto tells him it's his chance to impress Lu. He recalls how she told him that his mind is his greatest weapon, and he thinks he can still win if he outsmarts everyone. He tells Sakamoto not to worry, because he already predicted that his subordinates would betray him, and he mentions that their guns will explode if they try to use them. So they check their guns, but Sakamoto suddenly attacks them, and he uses the billiard balls to knock them out. One of them tries to escape, but Tang threatens to shoot him, telling him he was just bluffing. He tells Sakamoto he won the fight, saying he doesn't deserve to be with Lu because he put her in harm's way. But Sakamoto mentions that he doesn't know what Tang deserves, and he explains that he knows what it's like to protect those who are important to him. After that, Tang starts working for Sakamoto. and he tells everyone that X was the one who placed a bounty on Sakamoto's head. But they tell him they already know that. And Lou asks him if he knows XX's real name. So he reveals that nobody knows anything about him. They think his information isn't useful. But he tells them about a prison in Southeast Asia, where 4 inmates on death row were killed. And their faces were burned off. An X was painted on the wall, so everyone realizes that he was behind it, but Tang tells them about the recent cases in Japan, where people have been brutally murdered. He reveals that the methods used to kill them resemble those of the 4 inmates, who are supposed to be dead, so he thinks they faked their deaths and made their way to Japan. We see the 4 inmates in a restaurant, as one of them named Don Piu realizes that everyone's talking about them. She wonders what X wants them to do, and the conduct named SA thinks they should relax until he gives them orders. Another inmate named Apato complains about his burger having pickles. But the brute named Minimus crushes it with his hand and eats it. Kashima joins them and he gives them a list of their targets. He mentions that everyone on the list is dangerous to their organization, but SA can't believe Sakamoto is included because he looks pathetic. Kashima warns everyone not to underestimate their targets, because they might lose their lives. But Minimus becomes upset hearing this and he crushes his table, telling Kashima they'll eliminate their targets within a month. We return to Tang as he receives his paycheck. And he tells Sakamoto and his friends to escape, because the convicts will hunt them down, but Sakamoto thinks they'll be able to tell him about X. And his friends decide to take them on. Tang thinks they're insane, and he tells them the convicts are extremely dangerous. But Sakamoto notes that it's exactly why he needs to take them down. Finally, this is video ending. Remember to like and subscribe. Pica recap. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.